Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.
So, thank you all for coming, for making it past the train strikes. So yes, today we are going to talk about AI taking your job as content writers. So I run Lingo with my lovely husband, Craig Taylor. It's just the two of us. And yeah, we provide outsourced content marketing, so content writing, press releases, blogs, things like that for agencies and small businesses. So, first of all, why did we decide to talk about this? Well, for a few reasons. Number one, we noticed we're getting a few more briefs lately of people saying, we've actually got stuff that's been written by an AI, but could you edit it for us? Number two, last time we came to BrightonSEO, we told people that we wrote content, and someone said to us, well, can't you just get an AI to do it for you? And I'll leave it to Rick Mail to say what our response was.
Sod off!
That was sod off. I don't know if you heard that, but yeah, you get the point. I always have to have Rick Mail in a presentation, sort of thing. It's not just that. How many people remember this really creepy DALL-E stuff that started popping up earlier on this year? It's quite topical at the moment, and people are talking about it a lot on social media. So it could be the bad examples, like the Ukraine war has been raging on for 2 years now. It might be the really long case studies. It might be the good ones, and on and on and on and on. We have people talking about AI content quite a lot at the moment, so we thought it was quite a pertinent time to discuss this topic. But let's go back to the beginning. What is AI in the context of writing content? Obviously, we've seen things like Alexa or our smartwatches or whatever, but in the context of actually writing content, well, artificial intelligence is based on human inputs, just as your watch is reading how fast you're running, whatever. It's based on the data that we give it, which could be a good or a bad thing. It dates back, actually, to the 1950s. So one of the first examples of the model was when a load of researchers at Manchester University got together and tried to make a love letter generator. Very simple set of parameters. It would say insert adjective, insert verb, so I love you, you are bootylicious or whatever. Then move on forward to sort of 70s and 80s. We have the Turing test. So there was a little computer devicey thingy called Eliza, where people would have a chat with Eliza and she would chat back to you, and they would try and determine whether or not they were actually talking to a human or to a computer. And then fast forward even more modern to GPT-3, Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. So this is really, really new. It was launched in 2020 by OpenAI. Obviously, this guy had something to do with it. He funded OpenAI, as did Microsoft. They got involved with the funding. And it's essentially a much, much more advanced version of those love letters we discussed. So it's working with massive, massive data sets. So it's got millions of Wikipedia articles, millions of books to help with the outcomes. It's also got 175 billion parameters. Now, when I say parameters or nodes, this is essentially, it's sort of helping create outcomes based on the data we give it. So if I were to say to an AI, write me an article about Winston Churchill, it could find 3 articles saying Winston Churchill, mentioning him and carrots, or it could find 1 million articles saying Winston Churchill and World War II. So based on that sort of weighting, it's more likely to create content with mentions of World War II than it is carrots. So it's all about that sort of weighting. And we see it used in modern day apps. So again, it could be with your voice assistants, or it could be with your content writing software. So with this in mind, we decided to test out said software. And we downloaded Jasper.AI, accidentally paid £400 for the privilege, but luckily they refunded us. So, I was quite impressed with it at first, I have to say, as a writer. It gave me quite a few options, so, you know, documents, commands, creative stories, blog post conclusions, video script outlines. So you can see we can use it for a number of different channels. So I was like, okay, that's good, that's scary, that's good. So I thought, all right, I'll do a few tests. So number one, I tried the blog intro feature. And I was a little bit pig-headed about it. I was like, a machine trying to outdo me, come on then. So I went, okay, let's do 6 tips for virgins, and let's make the audience teenage boys, and let's make the tone of voice friendly. Okay, so here's what it came back with. Are you a teenage boy who is still a virgin? According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, let's talk about diseases to these 15-year-old boys. Do not have sex, you will get chlamydia and die. Very kind of Mean Girls vibes here. So it's not the kind of thing we want to be reading for a 15-year-old boy. For reference, here is what the actual first result on Google came back with. So you can see here it's a lot more empathetic. There's a lot more human element to it. All right, we'll stop mucking around. Let's try again. We'll do a company bio. So I thought, let's make up a company, Jenny's Ice Cream. So I said to it, Jenny makes yummy ice cream and has done since 2008. And I said, let's make a stern tone of voice just for the bounce. And okay, it came back with a pretty good result. So, since 2008, like I said, churning out delicious artisanal ice cream made with a whole lot of love, all natural ingredients. Okay, that's pretty good. I'd probably buy from Jenny's Ice Cream. But if you look a bit closer, this has actually made some quite outrageous claims. Number one, it said it was all natural ingredients. Number two, it said nothing artificial. Number three, it said it was independently owned. I didn't tell it that. So essentially, this is fake news. And this is quite worrying, particularly if we're writing about things like that sort of your money, your life content that could affect people's well-being. So I thought, okay, right, I'll try it on my own website. I'll try to write my homepage for Katie Lingo. So I said, we provide outsourced content marketing services for agencies and small businesses. Let's make the tone of voice funny. We try to be funny where we can. Here's what we got. All right, content marketing solution for agencies and small businesses, brilliant. But don't want to sacrifice quality or funny. Or example two, for agencies and small businesses who want to get funny. That's not quite what I meant there. So you've kind of confused the tone of voice there with the text itself. Okay, all right, I'll stop mucking around and hitting the microphone. So I gave it a bit more information. I said we're trained journalists, we're trained marketers, we don't charge by the word, we're not the cheapest, and we got a pretty good result, with a bit of humour thrown in, drives results, journalists and marketers, pretty good result. It's a little bit me for my taste, but, pretty impressed with it. So again, kind of worrying. So with that in mind, where can AI actually help us? Well, I'm sure a lot of writers in this room have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Grammarly. I know I certainly do. But it can definitely help you with things like editing, spotting those little errors like if I've accidentally said TO instead of TOO. But equally, it does get a lot of really simple things wrong. Like if I've got 10 years experience, apostrophe after the S, it tells me it's wrong. So it's quite frustrating. Number two, coming up with ideas. I'm sure a lot of writers suffer with writer's block, myself included, so we might use a tool like ClearScope or indeed Jasper.AI, actually logging in there and looking at the ideas tool just based on the sort of content that's already out there, what other people are ranking for and what they're already covering. Number three, transcription. Now, when I trained in journalism, I actually gave myself carpal tunnel trying to learn shorthand. So it's really, really difficult to write notes at the same time. And even in the more modern age on things like Zoom, when you're typing notes, it's really quite distracting. So the lovely Megan Downs, copywriter, said, here's how I used AI to help my content creation. And she used Otter.ai, simple transcription tool. So it's giving you that information rather than you having to write it out live. It can even tell you who's speaking. So it's quite helpful if you're short on time. Another one, sadly, there will always be a market for just not very good content. There might be people who just don't want to pay a lot for, let's say, meta descriptions or product descriptions. And, that's a prerogative, but there will be a case for it, sadly. So, with all of that in mind, we should probably be careful. And here is a little snippet of a conversation I had with a freelance SEO called Dan Callis. Matt, he mentioned your name, actually. And here are his 2 cents on AI content.
It's the fact that the more that comes out, the more of a footprint it's going to leave, and the easier it's going to be for Google to connect the dots. The reason it's struggling with AI content right now is there's not enough out there for them to really determine, oh, that's what it is, that's the footprint it leaves.
Okay.
But the more people do it, the more of an obvious sign it's going to leave. And you've got to remember, like, people go, oh, well, Google can't detect AI content, right? Well, I think that anytime someone says that to you, you need to remind them that they need to put the word yet on the end of that statement.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, Google are going to figure it out.
He's got a good point. He's a really nice guy, you should meet him. And here's just a few examples from those content pieces I showed you earlier. So if you're looking for, look no further than, so if you're looking for advice on how to lose your virginity, 3 examples of the same thing using those completely different content types. So if I can spot that as a human, what's Google going to be able to do in the future? Who knows? So, with that in mind, where does it fail? Well, number one, that original information. So you can see here, I interviewed Dan personally. I've got that information straight from the horse's mouth. It's something we do quite often. We work with Reuters, we interview people from Siemens, T-Mobiles, and we get that information straight from the source. So we're making sure we're getting our facts right. Which is really important because if you're getting your facts wrong, then all hell could break loose. Here's another example that Dan gave me from a LinkedIn post from Zoe Ashbridge. She said that the first 8 results on Google were quoting a statistic that was wrong. So we know that AI can't check facts. So if we put something out there without checking facts, we could really get ourselves into a lot of hot water. And why is that a problem? Well, I think Matt touched on this earlier. It's about reader trust. So Reuters, again, we work with them, and every year they do a report called the Digital Journalism Report, and they look at sort of people's attitudes towards news, how they consume it, whether or not they trust it. And interestingly, in 2020, 37% of people said that they didn't trust news around coronavirus, which just goes to show, for using AI, it can be quite perilous. Another one, not quite as serious, but nonetheless something to consider, is live content. So we all remember when we had all those resignations earlier on in summer, live tweeting, and AI can't do that because it's drawing on content that's already out there. So it might even be something as simple as the Eurovision results. So not the end of the world, but it is a potentially missed opportunity there if you are on social media and you want to create content that way. God, stop tapping this microphone. Another one, personality. Quite simple, really. So it could be your tone of voice. You might have a specific tone of voice. You might be very formal, very informal. You might have a certain house styles. Let's say I spell e-commerce with a hyphen or with a capital C. You might have your own sort of creative spin, putting some pop culture references within your writing. Or you might just have your own experience, your own stories to tell. And AI can't do any of that. So, a few points to ponder about AI in general then. Number one, ethics. Oh, an excuse. Oof, Jeff Goldblum. Oof. Sorry, love. So, the ethics of AI. AI is based on human inputs, which means, sadly, it does show the darker side of humans. One word embedding test on Google showed that it matched man to computer programmer and woman to homemaker. Another test with LinkedIn AI was if you search for Stephanie, LinkedIn will suggest, did you mean Stephen? Another test showed a Twitter bot trying to emulate human activity. Within 24 hours, it was spouting anti-Semitic hate speech. So it really shows that humans are just bleh. Second thing, an index issue. I had a lovely chat with Danny Richmond and Matt Bennett prior to this talk, talking all about the perils of AI. And Danny mentioned Bing. There was a case study on Reddit wherein a guy uploaded a load of AI-generated content, made a website, it went live, it all got indexed by Bing, and then within a couple of days, suddenly it's marked as spam content and it's no longer indexed. And the theory is, and it's just speculative, is that because Microsoft are linked to OpenAI, possibly somehow they can determine that it is actually AI content. So, is it going to affect indexing? Who knows, but it's something to think about. Another one, does this content even rank? Well, yes, it can do, but again, as this conversation sort of revealed, it's better for coming up with ideas rather than creating long-form content. Here's another little test we ran. So we used ClearScope, which is a great SEO tool just for sort of suggesting topics and themes you should be writing about if you want to rank for a certain keyword. So I used that blog intro tool and blog writing tool in Jasper to talk about how to start running. And you can see here, just based on the terms that are being used, it's got a grade F, so not great. Me, by comparison, I'm a marathon runner. I put it in, and obviously I guess I just got that personal experience. I got a C+. All right, it's not perfect, but hey, I'm not Paul Radcliffe. So, but just goes to show that that kind of human input and that personal expertise really does help with your content creation. And then just for fun, I'm sure a lot of people have talked about this today, but we have a new Google update. Thank you for doing that just before BrightonSEO. Cheers, guys. So we have the helpful content update. So Google is essentially cracking down on content that isn't unique. And guess what? AI is being drawn from content that's already out there. So we've got this really, really long quote about movie reviews. So essentially, if I want to know if a movie is good or not, if I'm just Googling this and I'm reading the same review a million times because no one's put anything fresh out there, it's not come from a natural user experience, and that's not going to help me. So that's actually going to potentially get me penalized later on down the line. So again, like always, Google just wants to help users. We want helpful content. So what do we know about this update so far? Well, we know it's site-wide, so if you are just trying to do a sort of churn and burn and rank really quickly with a load of AI content, you could possibly get penalized later on. We know that it should be for humans. I mean, we've always known this, but there's always a temptation just to get a load of long-tail keywords and keyword stuff and just write a load of questions and hope for the best. But we're trying to write it for humans. Let's make it readable. We also know it needs that first-hand expertise. So this is really pertinent for things like product reviews, whether or not you've actually tried that product or run that marathon. And it's a really great excuse for us to sort of use our storytelling capabilities as well as writers. What else do we know? Content can't be irrelevant, so just because it's trending doesn't mean that you can just try and game Google and get to the top. So if I've got a website about ice fishing and I'm talking about Harry and Meghan at the Queen's funeral, God bless her, I'm not going to rank very well, and Google's probably going to penalise me for it. So there's no point discussing something just because it's on trend. So, any Haircut 100 fans in here? Yeah. Anyone heard of Haircut 100? Oh, yes, thank you very much. I thought that was tenuous. Where does it go from here? Well, if everyone relies on AI, then we're probably going to just get a load of crap being churned out. And let's face it, it is already happening. So it's something we need to be wary of as writers and content creators. Second, if Google is already cracking down on its quality guidelines, these are only going to get stricter. There is no point trying to game Google because it's just going to recognize these patterns and it's just going to make life harder for us. So we might as well actually be good at our jobs. But we also have to acknowledge that AI is not going to go away and it is going to get better. So we've seen it in our everyday lives, so it might be with our voice assistants, it might be with our self-driving cars or with our Apple Watches. But what about in our roles as content writers, content creators? We have to accept that our roles might evolve a little bit. So, number one, we might become editors rather than creating content from scratch. It might be a case of we have more of a kind of proofreading, copy editing sort of role there. So it could be a case of, yes, actually we have given you this AI content, please can you edit it, put it into your own sort of words, your own sort of style. With that in mind, we might write more tone of voice guidelines. We might have to be a bit stricter and make sure that what we're saying is in line with our general sort of how we talk to people, whether or not being formal or a bit more sort of stuffy or informal. We might have to use it to come up with ideas. So it could just be that the internet is so completely saturated with content that we are using things like Jasper or ClearScope to just give us a few themes, even something that's just a bit of a springboard to have a meeting with actual humans to come up with ideas. And we may, sadly, as writers, have to prove our worth. I'm sure a lot of people here on LinkedIn have seen people trying to just sort of have a race to the bottom and buy content as cheaply as possible on things like Upwork. So we might have to prove our worth even more if people are saying to us, well, I can get it written by an AI free. So that's why we have to not be complacent, and we have to, as writers, never stop learning. And we have to show people that we can do it. It's just an excuse to post my marathon medal, sorry. But we have to be learning all the time. So how can we learn as writers? Here are a few useful resources that I use in my writing. Hemingway app, really helpful. Yes, it is a machine, but it does help you make your writing just that little bit more readable, so it makes sure your sentences aren't too sort of long, not too run-on, make sure you're not relying on the passive voice too much. Things like ClearScope or Phrase, if you are really stuck for ideas, that can show you what's ranking already, so some themes, sort of topics to discuss there, semantic keywords. 100 ways to improve your writing. Gary Provost, absolute hero. He talks about writing music rather than words, so really sort of getting that rhythm right, just making it a bit more engaging for the reader. And finally, a little bit of a cheap plug here. This is Why You Suck at Writing by me, Katie, Thompson, Taylor, Lingo, whatever you want to call me. And this basically consolidates all these points in one long-form blog post. So, just to round off then, a few do's and don'ts. First of all, please check your facts. Make sure you're not just quoting something that other people have put out there but is actually wrong. If you are checking them, please make sure you're citing your sources and make sure it is a credible source, something, let's say, like the World Health Organization. Third, please stick to those Google quality guidelines and keep looking at them. Keep looking every time they get updated or every time there's a new update, like this helpful content update. Number 4, acknowledge that there are some tools out there that can help you, like Grammarly, but don't use them to replace humans. Don't ask questions and not answer them. So again, thinking about that helpful content update, there's a lovely post from the team at Embryo saying things like, when is the new Stranger Things series released? Doing a whole article about, oh yeah, we're now on series 4 and blah, 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 and the Mind Flayer or whatever. It doesn't actually answer the question, so Google's going to crack down on that, so don't just try and trend for something but not actually answer the question. It's frustrating. Don't use one external link only. It will just look like a kind of sponsored post masquerading it as a helpful post. So use a lot of external links, show people that you've actually done your research. Don't just use AI to churn out loads of crap in the hope that you might rank quite quickly, because Google will eventually crack down on you, I hope. Don't ignore the benefits of AI at the same time. So if you are using it to generate ideas or just to check with that spelling grammar, by all means, just make sure that you're using it to complement your existing skills. And finally, don't forget the past. We've all seen things like Panda and Penguin and suddenly sites just dropping off the face of the earth. So just remember that you can't game Google. The machines will always win, except for content writing, of course. So that is all from me. I've got to rush off now and go and get married, but again, properly, like with a white dress and everything. But I will be around for questions at the end. But then after that, yeah, catch me on Twitter, lots of silly content, or Instagram, whatever. But thank you very, very much.
Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.